women fear that we're going to be seen as complainers or hard to work with. We almost talk ourselves out of escalating stuff sometimes because we're like, is it worth it? Are they going to make my future harder? Do I just suck it up? It's so backwards and so frustrating.
I'm a medical doctor going through my final years of subspecialty training. I had a miscarriage in April this year and had to ask for time off work to go through the miscarriage, and I developed complications afterwards resulting in a hospital admission. I'm so sorry you went through that.
Yeah.
This time off had to be approved by my head of department, I was told. A few months later, I interviewed for a fellow job, a promotion, and was told that I'm not ready. Then in my supervisor meeting a month or two later, my supervisor, who is the head of department, flatly asked me how my family planning is going. I feel very uncomfortable about this situation and feel like I'm being held back because I'm a mother hoping to have another child. I guess my question is, A, am I wrong to feel I'm being discriminated against? B, is there anything that I should or could do about this? And C, should I just suck it up and put up with it, keeping in mind these people have total control over my career progression in training and in hospital?
At the end of the day, it is illegal. You cannot discriminate against somebody for wanting to have a child. Like, that is the rule. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. That doesn't mean people are not making these decisions thinking, well, they might have a kid in a year, so they're not going to be ideal, even if you're the best candidate. And unfortunately, there is no escaping that. My suggestion, like your head of department shouldn't have asked you that. Absolutely shouldn't have. And you have every right to say, you can't ask me that and not answer, but it's not going to change the outcome because obviously they've made their mind up. I would almost encourage you to lie or not give the information. I would almost say I have no plans. Just say I don't have any plans anymore, because if you then get that position, you can go and have a baby if you like, and then they can't do anything about it except support you. I'm not saying that's the right thing, but it is something that women have to face, and it fucking sucks. It sucks because it comes back to this idea of that you can't have it all. And this is the prime example of you have worked to get to the point in a hospital or the medical industry that you are applying for a fellowship.
Yeah.
You have studied for like between 8, 10, 12 years. Like, a lot of people are dedicating their entire life to get to that point. So then to be told that like, oh, well, you know what? Like, I know you had a miscarriage, and use that information against you in a way. It's almost weaponized information to say like, it's obvious that you're trying to plan, so I don't think you're right for this job.
I think it's a very hard one for us to answer because, I mean, me particularly, I don't work in a medical field. I don't want to, for anybody who is, you know, maybe a doctor who works in the medical field, I can only imagine the amount of study, the amount of dedication. And I say this because, firstly, I have dated someone who was a cardiothoracic surgeon for 2 years. I also have a best friend who is an anaesthetist, who was one of my bridesmaids, and I have seen the sacrifices that she has made as a mum and also as and for her family in order to maintain her career. And it's really, really hard. It's so hard. But I do not want to pretend as though I have any information or any skin in this game.
But I think let's not even look at this as just medical, because this relates to any industry.
It does, but I think the issue is in the medical industry is how deeply misogynistic it is, because as a woman, you're already so outnumbered. You are so outnumbered when you get into specialty departments, when you specialize in a field. And often that is because as a woman, it's harder to make those sacrifices around when you're going to have children, when you're going to have time off. My advice in this, and I think zooming out and not making it medical specific, no boss has a right to ask you about your plans for pregnancy and your plans, your family planning plans. They do not have a right to do that. And if you're put in that in an uncomfortable situation, I would absolutely agree with you, Britt. You don't have a responsibility to be forthcoming, especially if you know that the reason why they're asking you is to limit the ability to give you the employment that you're after. It's very hard because, I mean, I could look at this from the alternate perspective of like, well, if you're applying for a job, but then you're planning on taking X amount of time off, is it the right time to take this career opportunity? They're going to then have to fill the place, blah, blah, blah. Sure, I could look at it from that perspective, but in this instance, I want to take the perspective of the employee, and you should not be punished because you also want to be a mum and you also want to have a family. You should not have your career halted because at some point in the future, you want to have a family, and also because it's known to your bosses that you had a miscarriage. That is absolutely horrible.
But at the end of the day, the subconscious bias is there. The discrimination is there. They're not going to say it, but this is why I say withhold the truth. It doesn't have to be a lie. You can withhold the truth. You don't have to tell them that, yeah, in 1 year, I hope to have a child. It's no one else's business. You're a great doctor going for a position that should be judged on your skill level, not if you decide that you want to be a mum in the future. Like, it actually makes me so mad.
But also on this, the first question you asked, am I wrong to feel I'm being discriminated against? No, you're not wrong to feel that you're being discriminated against, especially because you're being discriminated against because of the fact that you had a miscarriage and had to share that information with your bosses in order to have time off. That, I understand why you feel that way. Is there anything I should or could do about this? In this specific industry, I don't know if there is someone higher up than the head of department, but I would also probably say that in this industry, it's quite hard to escalate these types of issues, especially if a similar sentiment is going to be shared, because it can be a very male-dominated industry in terms of where you're working.
And then we go back to looking like it's so frustrating. But then you go back to looking like she's difficult. She's difficult to work with. Now she's complaining about her boss. You know, like if your hierarchy is all men, which in their 50s and 60s, which they probably majority of them are in that industry, then you're going to be seen as, I don't want to say you particularly, but we women fear that we're going to be seen as complainers or hard to work with, you know? So it's almost like we almost talk ourselves out of escalating stuff sometimes because we're like, is it worth it? Are they going to make my future harder? Do I just suck it up? It's so backwards and so frustrating.
The only thing I want to say in terms of like the specific role that you've gone for, a fellow job is obviously very competitive, and being told that you're not ready, it may have been that you're not ready. But I think the thing that has raised very alarming red flags for you is having your supervisor call a meeting with you to specifically ask what your family planning is and what are your plans for having children. I think anyone with any sense or reasoning would probably conflate the two, especially because the thing is if you're applying for a fellow job, you know how you stack up to your competitors. You know where you sit in terms of your ability, your skill set, and also your intelligence, because you've sat the exams.
Your experience as well.
Absolutely, right? So if you've not received the job when you know that you're one of the best equipped for it, then the question has to be asked, why? And so if the only conclusion you can come to is the fact that then shortly after you've had this conversation around what your plans are for having kids, then I would say like you're not naive in thinking that those two things could be and very well probably are conflated. And that is discrimination. And look, I mean, it is unfortunately something that a lot of women are faced with. And I think that any female who is of childbearing years,
which is like 15-year period, 20-year period,
probably is faced with this exact same issue. And I would say it also goes to show as to why there are so many more men in these roles, because for a lot of women, it's not obtainable to be able to maintain the pressures of work and also have a family at the same time. And I'm not saying that you should make sacrifices. I'm not saying that you should change your career. You've spent so much time to be able to be in the position that you're in. But I just think that you are within a very hard place, because the other question you've asked is, should I just suck it up and put up with it? I don't know what the right answer is to that, because I'm not entrenched in that industry enough to be able to say, this is the person to go and speak to. This is how you should fight against it. But I know that something should be done.
Yeah, I also like just to offer slightly more understanding from the head of department's perspective. And I'm not saying this in a way to because you would already be so hyper aware of this. But for people who aren't familiar with fellow jobs, they're often a year, sometimes two. They often involve quite a big research component. It depends on the specialty that you're in. And so I'm just trying to understand from a head of department's perspective, if they have a fellow job that firstly are so competitive and they're very specific to like the people that they want to bring on for it, you can't actually replace the person on that program. And also there could be other people that are affected by the research that's being conducted that is meant to be done by the fellow.
But it still doesn't matter, because
I know it's still discrimination.
But she knows that, right? If you've studied for 10 years and you're going for a fellowship, you know what's expected of you. Most likely she doesn't have family plans in that year, 12 months to 24 months fellowship, because she understands what it is. But on the off chance it happens, great, they'll work around it. But you cannot ask that question, do you have plans for family in the next year? Because that's obviously going to impact whether we give you the job. She might not have plans for another 5 years. We don't even know. We don't know if the pregnancy and the miscarriage was planned. We don't know if it's a spontaneous thing. regardless, there's a high chance she didn't get the job purely because she's a female of childbearing years.
Who had a miscarriage.
And that is evident because the question was asked. I can guarantee no one else was asked that question.
I agree with that. Look, I mean, like I said, I'm not in this industry. I understand how competitive it is to become a fellow. For all the people who do work in medical who are listening to this, like I know that you'll have your own thoughts and your own feelings around it. But I think going back to what you said is probably the most important thing, Britt, is that she has not even in this question told us whether she's planning on having children.
Exactly.
She just simply suffered a miscarriage, had to take time off because of health complications, and now she's being penalized apparently for that. And that I think is such a gross discrimination that is now going to impact her career, which I want to say this is what I think you should do, but I don't know what the right answers is. So maybe if you are someone who does work in this industry, we can put it in the discussion group. We can talk about it further. What would be the right ways in which to seek help and counselling and career progression when you feel like you've been stunted because of something that's out of your control?
Yeah, and I understand that I'm coming across as angry, but it's because I am angry. Like this topic makes me really mad because it consumes women's thoughts.
Yeah.
There's not an industry, not a woman now in any industry that hasn't thought, what's going to happen to my career if I have a baby? I think about it all the time.
Totally.
Like with radio, I'm like, oh my God, it's such a competitive industry. If I have a baby, will I ever come back? Will they replace me? They want me to come back after, these are just thoughts that women have, unfortunately, when you want to try and balance a career and have a baby. There's probably a huge part of me that's put off having kids for part of that reason, like multitude of other things. But it's upsetting that we live in a time where we still have to think about this.
And also, it's really interesting that there aren't precautions or solutions put in place for the instances where a fellow gets pregnant. Why does that not exist?
It actually does, from my own experience, because my boyfriend is a doctor. So if they do need to take time off from, they can go back to their program once their maternity leave is over, whenever they choose to. However, and again, it will depend on who you work with and specifically where you work, but people can be mad because you've taken a position that someone else has wanted really badly, and they can be mad because their research has been stunted. Like there are factors that I think none of this is fair on you, and I think none of it is fair on women who want to have children around these years. It really fucking sucks. I'm just trying to say that other people have got investments in these opportunities, and so if you do 100%, and it's not fair on anyone. It's not fair on anyone because of the way that the systems are designed, and that someone can't come in and take the position up from someone who has needed to take time off.
It's also the reason why so many women leave specialty training even after they've spent so much time doing it and become GPs, because they have a better balance of life and they're able to have a family, which, that this system doesn't support. Look, I mean, like I said, let's have this discussion more further on the Facebook discussion group. If you're not a member of that, it's Life Uncut discussion group. We'll put up a question and put this question specifically because I think we know we have so many people who work within this industry, who work within healthcare, who would have experienced this themselves. And I think that you guys, the Brains Trust, would probably be better equipped with what are the next steps and how can you navigate this type of discrimination within the workplace.